Hey, Jerry Fetta here. Welcome back to another weekly wealth walk. So I want to talk to you today about the way that I invest, because it's very different than the way most people invest, and there's actually a historical reason behind it. Stay tuned, I'm going to tell you all about it today. Hey, welcome back to another weekly wealth walk. This is Jerry Fetta. I've been doing these weekly wealth walks, number one, to get some exercise, show off some beautiful scenery, but number two, I wanted to share with you while I'm walking, while I'm thinking, while I'm talking to you, today, the way that I invest, the way that historically people have invested. So I was watching a movie this past weekend. It's called All the Money in the World. It's about an oil tycoon by the name of Getty. Okay, this is his last name, Getty. Right, so if you look him up in the 1960s, 70s, he was the wealthiest living individual in the world. You know, we hear about that today with people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and these different names, right? But here's what's unique about Getty. When Getty built his wealth, he did it all through private wealth, like businesses he built, assets that he invested in. And this is the way that wealth had always been built for hundreds of years. You look at Rockefeller, like he built an oil dynasty. You look at Carnegie, he built US Steel, right? So if you look at Getty, he built an oil industry that was actually it was international, it was crossover in the Middle East. It was something that people hadn't really been doing yet. And the reason that this is important and the reason that it impacts the way that I build wealth is if you look shortly after that, the wealthy started building wealth differently. And this is what I'm gonna call old money versus new money. And the problem with the new money way of building wealth is it's not accessible. I'm gonna share with you why. I'm gonna break this down into three parts. Because when I first started this wealth building journey, it was all based on the premise that, man, there's gotta be something better than Wall Street. There's gotta be something better than putting my money in mutual funds and stocks where they get manipulated and putting them in banks and all this kind of stuff. And I went on a search to find that way. And if that wasn't a possibility, I wouldn't be teaching people how to build wealth. When you look at the modern way of building wealth, the way that it works and the way that most people are doing it, they have an idea. Now, when I was a kid, my mom married an old guy named Frank. Okay, Frank was like 75 years old, right? So I'm 9, 10 years old. I have a 75-year-old stepdad. Very interesting. And so Frank would say things sometimes that at the time I didn't like. As an adult, I can look back and admire them. And I remember telling him one time, you know, something I wish this, I wish that. And he was like, wish in one hand, spit in the other. See which one you run out of first, right? And ideas are that way. You can have ideas in one hand, you can spit in the other. You're gonna run out of spit before you run out of ideas. An idea is only as valuable as it gets done, as it's made to become reality. So what is it that backs a good idea? Support. Okay, in business, that support would be people buying it, customers using it. And in investment, an idea would be I'm gonna buy real estate and I'm going to sell or finance it to someone, or I'm gonna lease it out to them. That idea would be measured by how successful am I in getting someone to live there and how much money do I make from the idea, right? That's the support that I get back. So if an idea doesn't have good support or it lacks control on the support, it's not that good of an idea. Now, what does this have to do with wealth building? In modern times, the wealthy get wealthy by having an idea that generally doesn't make money. So it's a business idea that doesn't make money. It's not bringing in revenue. It's not profitable. And they don't have the resources to do it, or maybe they do and they just don't want to put the work in to build it. So what do? They find venture capital firms that will invest money into a pre-revenue company. This is the angel investing thing. This company will fund all of the losses for however long it takes before this idea finally gets some traction. So they're nurturing the idea alive. And so in order to get in on this, you have to have a lot of money. And so when you look at companies that go public today, often it starts in this incubation phase, then they get venture capital as money, then they do their pre-IPO fundraising, then they finally go public. And when they go public, everyone can now invest. By the time everyone can invest, what's really happening? The founders and the original VC, venture capitalist investors, are cashing out. That's what's happening. When a company goes public, those that got in prior to it going public are the ones getting rich. Okay, everyone else is playing with leftovers at that point. So when you look at companies that make money this way, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, the Elon Musks of the world, you and I can't do that. Okay, unless you're a billionaire, unless you're very highly connected, you can't do that. You're not going to be somebody that gets in at that level unless you have a lot of money and you have a lot of connections and a lot of network, which means that version of wealth building isn't scalable for the everyday person. Okay, that's the good old boys club. That started happening in the 1970s and 80s. So when Bill Gates entered the Forbes list, he was kind of symbolically the first one to do that. Okay, the first one to build wealth that way. Now, I'm not a fan of Wall Street. So the idea that I come up with a company thing and I use private VC money, venture capitalist money to fund it, and angel investors to fund it, to then take it all the way to the public market, to then basically offload it onto all of the hardworking people who are actually producing income, who are actually getting the job done, so I can get rich on their expense. That's another version of that. And now we're holding it in our retirement accounts, hoping it's doing well. Getty didn't build his wealth that way. Rockefeller did not build his wealth that way. Okay, Carnegie didn't build his wealth that way. When you look at this, what did they do? That's the question I wanted to know. What did they do? Because if I'm not a connected, wealthy billionaire guy with the good old boys club backing me and all this kind of stuff, it's imperative that I figure out how to build wealth another way. And so what they did is they built businesses, or they invested in private businesses. They earned, they worked hard, they saved as much as they possibly could. One of the commonalities you'll see with all of the early billionaires, they were frugal. They measured where their money went. They actually cared. Why? Because every dollar they didn't keep was a dollar that wasn't going to build their freedom and wealth later. So Getty built an oil empire with his own work, with his own oil, with his own drilling, with his own negotiation, with his own money. He built it privately. And building wealth this way is the way all of us can still do it, right? So if you buy real estate, you are building private wealth. If you own and expand a privately owned business or invest in a privately owned business, you're building private wealth. If you are becoming your own banker using life insurance, you're building private wealth. And here's the beauty of the way that I do it. Like the way that I do it, I try and involve as little of my time as possible if I'm building wealth. So I have a rule, never trade new time for old money. Okay, I never work for the same dollar twice. If I worked for it once, I'm done. That was it. I already traded time for that money, I'm done. Now, when I do my investing, there's the investment itself. This is the Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger way of investing. This is how I invest. You look at what is the intrinsic underlying value of an asset based on the income it's gonna produce, based on how much money you're gonna make, and based on who's running it. What's the management like? Okay, what are the systems and procedures like? And then how much of my time is involved? So I want an investment that ideally pays me the most money it possibly can for the longest period of time while requiring the least amount of my time. And if I have that, it starts to build freedom and volume. Okay, and then I also look at, like, is it doing good in this world? Is it something that is benevolent? It actually helps people, right? I'm not gonna just be a raw capitalist, selling things that I don't believe in or investing in things I don't believe in. It's gotta help people also. I also wanna know who's managing it, because sure as hell is not gonna be me. I manage a company already. You might work in a company, you might have a job, you have a family. The whole point of wealth is not to trade more of your time. So who's managing it really matters, because that's gonna be the skill to make sure it goes smoothly and actually turns into what we want to turn it into. Look at that, that's a beautiful view. So building wealth this way, it's about finding the right assets, finding the right people, and then it's also about structure. So I'm gonna share with you something that I do, that I teach, that most people don't ever talk about. And when you study the top 1% historically, the number one asset that they own is small business equity. If you look at Berkshire Hathaway, for example, Berkshire Hathaway is what's known as a holding company, meaning they don't sell products, they don't sell services, they barely have any staff. It's a corporation that invests as a living. Like, that's what it does professionally, is they buy good companies, they invest in good companies. I want to build a wealth portfolio like that. I want to operate my wealth like a company. And so when I operate it like a company, I'm going to share with you what happens. Think about your retirement account or your investment now. How is it valued? It's valued based on the worth of the asset that you bought. So if you have $1 million in stocks, on your net worth statement, it says $1 million. Why? Because you have $1 million in stocks. If you have $1 million in real estate, on your net worth statement, it says $1 million. Why? Because you own $1 million in real estate. That's not how companies are valued. Companies are valued, when they're structured correctly, at a multiple of their earnings. Meaning you've got the underlying value of the assets. If you own real estate or stocks, great. Now, you wouldn't really do this with stocks, in my opinion, because I wouldn't want to be in the Wall Street world. But if you own real estate, you've got the value of the real estate itself. Then you have the earnings. How much income does it throw off? And if it throws off a good amount of income and you actually operate it like a company and you run it like a business, not like a mom and pop's or just a retirement account or a wealth portfolio, you run it like a business, you can value a multiple of those earnings if done correctly. And this is what I do. This is what Berkshire Hathaway does. See, they buy Coca-Cola shares, for example. The average everyday person, all they get is the share value for their net worth statement. Berkshire buys Coca-Cola and they take the income they receive from owning Coca-Cola and they add that to their revenue. So they make $500 million a year in revenue as a holding company. They get a multiple of those earnings, and the multiple of those earnings plus the asset value is considered the asset. So you get to count the business value of what you're investing in plus the investment value, all through structure. This is the old school way of building wealth. Now here's the beauty. Not everyone should run a company. I'm gonna come right out and say it is not in most people. 95% of small businesses fail in the first 5 years for a reason. It's hard. It's not easy. Not everyone should try it. Not everyone's gonna do well. But if you do it correctly, where you have the right partnerships, you're not the one responsible for running everything. You can invest with someone that knows what they're doing. You can have ownership in the venture. You can value the revenue. You can be majority, all this kind of stuff, but you have someone coming in and assisting you, right? And that's what I do with a lot of my clientele is I focus on how do we build wealth like a company for you? How do we value your wealth the way that top 1%ers do? Investing in those same assets, building private wealth the way that Getty did, the way that Rockefeller did, the way that Carnegie did, not the way that Bezos and Musk and Zuckerberg and all these people did, because the reality is, unless you have the connections and the money and the investment backing that they have, you're not gonna do that. So if you're interested in building private wealth the old way, okay, and again, old doesn't mean bad. Old just means it's been around for a while. I believe if things have been around for a while and they're still better, I'm gonna stick with those. Doesn't matter if you innovate. If the innovation's not better and more accessible, I think that's a failure on the part of innovation. So if you wanna build private wealth, that's something my company can help you with. If you wanna learn more, reach out to us, comment below. I'd love to give you a strategy on how you can start doing this with your own investing and build wealth the same way.